next halacha of the Rambam, which is all very lamaisa for anybody who's in the age, who's in. I know there are different phrases now. I've learned there's in the parsha and there's in the sugya. There's different phrases that people use. Not talking about learning Torah. That is people who are in the parsha and in the sugya. Different words that people use. That's this next Rambam. When should somebody get into the parsha, which hopefully will lead to into the sugya? When is that? The Rambam says in Perak Aleph Halacha Hey of the Torah, Olam Yilma Adam Torah Achar Kach Yisha. Person should first focus on their learning. First focus on their learning, and then get married. You won't be able to have full focus if there's a girl in the picture. Obviously, there's times for everything. But there's a certain time, obviously, your years in yeshiva should be time spent without any other distractions. And relationships of this kind, which take time, and it's important to take time, so then that is something that is not encouraged at this time. If somebody's Yitzhar is getting over him, or I might add, if somebody's already in a relationship from beforehand, it wasn't planned and it wasn't whatever, but it's happening and they know they're going to get married, and it might be easier and healthier spiritually to get married. So then obviously the Rambam says, you're able to learn Torah after you get married too. It's not all downhill from there, right? There are some positives, and even the Gemara says if somebody until they get married, once they get married, then there's Zochel Torah. There is a certain completion and completeness that one has, even in Torah when one gets married. But sure, in the younger years when one is not in a relationship, one has to know when is the proper time. Remind me, I hope to give a Tzichas Chaim later in the year about dating and related issues. But that is, I think I gave a Shalom Bayis one before earlier in the year. Shalom Bayis in general, but specifically about dating. Hopefully we'll talk about that later. But as the Rambam says, the message of this Rambam is that there's a time for everything. Time for everything. People say, when is the appropriate time? I'm a big believer in getting married young. I'm a fan of that. I don't think that it should be pushed off. Again, sometimes somebody could try, and it takes them a long time to find the right one. But your Shana Aleph, Shana Bet is generally. We had a Shana Aleph guy from last year that got married a couple weeks ago. But in general, Shana Aleph, Shana Bet is not the time to be focusing on that type of relationship. There are other relationships we need to work on. Your relationship with the Rashba, your relationship with the Ksos, your relationship with other members of the family. Those are definitely relationships that we need to work on at this time of life. But relationships with other types of people, so that's should come, but not during Shana Al Shana. When exactly afterwards? So we can talk, and maybe we'll that'll be part of the dating Sichos Chaim. But it doesn't mean the second after Shana Bet either. That's also maybe not the most appropriate. But again, senior year in college is it's already a good time. But anyway, we'll talk about it. One other halacha the Rambam says, Me'emasai maschil aviv lo Torah. So when does learning Torah start? When does the chiyuv of the father start? We said the father is a chiyuv, teach his son Torah. When does that chiyuv of Talmud Torah start? Misha yaschil l'daber. When he starts to talk, ask the average person on the street, when do you start educating your kid? When he starts to talk, when he's 1.5 years old? That's when you start educating him. Yes. Melamdo Torah tivalanu Moshe Morasha. The first pasuk you teach the child, Torah tivalanu Moshe. First pasuk of Kriya Shema. Those two psukim and what they symbolize. What do they symbolize? Mesora, Kabbalah Tzomach Shamayim, Yachar Kach Malamdo Ma'at, psukim. And after that, little by little, psukim. There's no mitzvah to teach them to say Abba or Ima. It's nice, we love it, and we're very happy about it. But the mitzvah is to teach them to say Torah, Tiva Shema Yisrael, and the message is obviously, and the psukim little by little, ben Jesho ben Sheva, until he's 6 or 7, and hopefully by then he'll know all of Tanakh by heart. Fi Bar Yo, Molicho, Eitz Amalam, Tinokos, and you start sending him to yeshiva. Obviously, nowadays, maybe we said even earlier than 5, 6, or 7. But in those days, a lot of education took place in the home. But again, there's with the messages that education starts at a very young age, right? There's a Gemara, there's the Yerushalmi, maybe it's Yerushalmi, but one of the Tanoim, I think it's based on a Gemara in Chagiga. One second. Gemara in Chagiga, I think on Daf Gimel, maybe. 1 second. Yeah, Daf Gimel. Daf Gimel. My suburb, Yochanan and Brocha, Razim and Chasma, they were walking to go see the Rabbi Yoshua in Pekian. Amar Lahem, he says, Ma chidush hayeh b'beis hamedrash today? No? What was the chidush of the beis medrash today? Tell me something you learned. Amar lo talmid chanu u'meimechanu shosim. You're our Rabbi. What was the chidush of the beis medrash? You teach us everything we know. Amar Lahem, al Pekian yafshel beis medrash v'lo chidush. That's where that famous line is. Yafshel beis medrash v'lo chidush chagiga daf gimel. There's got to be something new that you came up with. So he says, who gave the shear this morning? Rabbi ben Azariah. What did he say? What did the pasuk in Hakel? Hakel asa'am anashim anashim b'taf. Why did the men come to learn? Why did the women come to hear? Why did the children come? B'taf, the babies, daily din schar l'miviyayim. Because bring schar for those who brought them. What does Rabbi Yeshua the Kian answered to them? It's an amazing line. Margolis Tova is to be atchem. You had a pearl, this amazing drasha, and you weren't going to tell me? You weren't going to tell me this amazing pearl? How could you not want to have told me that? That's the Gemara, and that's the Achronim. What was he so excited about? It's just a drasha. Out of all drashas, you were not going to tell me this? Rabbi Yeshua's parents used to bring him to the Beis Medrash in his crib. He could hear the words of Torah in the Beis Medrash. And he always wondered, and he always was in a mystery. Why did my parents do that? I was just a baby. And he realized when he heard this drasha about Hakel, that even bring the babies to Hakel, that education starts at a very young age. Very little, like the Rambam says here. Right when the baby starts learning to talk, you say Torah Tzivah Moshe, you say Shema Yisrael, and we start teaching Torah, and education starts. When does education end? Starts at a very young age. Is there ever a time that parents can say, okay, I fulfilled my educational responsibility? Chazal teaches it never ends. Never ends. Remember the beginning of Yeshev, Yaakov Avinu says, the Gemara Rashi says, Tikish Yaakov Leishi B'Shalva. Yaakov thought, okay, I'm done. Shvatim, they're good. You know, they're all grown men. You know, the youngest is already a teenager. I'm good. No. But Baruch Hu says no. It's always education of children from youngest to oldest. And Hashem, we should be zochet to be able to be mechanech our children and be mechunach from our parents as much as we can. Okay, let's get back to our sugya. Can you say, Yaakov said, can you say that's a right that the mitzvah is on the father? Could be. Regarding Talmud Torah, the mitzvah is for sure on the father. The issue is, what about chinuch? The mitzvah of chinuch in general. Talmud Torah is for sure the mitzvah is on the father. That's a pasuk in Chumash. Okay, let's get back to our sugya. Everybody with me? We're ready? Switching. Okay, everybody is here now. I don't see one person, but I see almost everybody else. Okay, let's get back into our discussion. So we ended up talking about Dinim D'Rabbanan. This is like a little sugya within the sugya. We're speaking about Yerushas Habaal. How do you look at Yerushas Habaal? So he said maybe it's a regular Yerusha. You know, he has to get married, but once he overcomes that hurdle, then it's a regular Yerusha. Or do you say no? It's a new din called She'erus. That was Tosfos. She'er Basar. Maybe that's the Rashbam. They become one unit. Maybe that's like the Ramban. Basar Echad. Right? It's the relationship. Number two. But then we said maybe there's a third idea. If it's a din d'Rabbanan, especially, that's what the Rambam seemed to say. The Avnei Miluim said it beferish. It's just a schus of ishus. It's not real. It's not Yerusha. It's not She'erus. It's a din d'Rabbanan. It's part of the 10 financial obligations and privileges husbands and wives have to each other, the 6 and the 4, as we saw mentioned in the Rambam yesterday in Hilchos Ishus. Fine. But we said maybe it's not so simple because Tosfos and Ksubis, Daf Nun Vav, says, yes, Yerushas Habaal is Ein Loikim Torah, not related to Yerusha at all, right? That makes sense, according to what Avnei Miluim said. But the Tosfos of Bava Basra, Afman Pez says, no, Yerushas Habaal is Yeish Lo Shorish Min Torah, meaning it's connected to Yerusha Daraisa. So maybe that means because on the Rabbanan level, the Rabbanan gave him the status of a Yoresh, which is like approach number one that we said in the Daraisa world. Give him the status of Yoresh. So even if it's the Rabbanan, it's not clear whether it's just a schus of ishus or it is a yoresh midrabanan. But then we ended off by saying the suggestion of the Merkavas HaMishnah that if you say it's a yoresh drabanan, maybe that can help for the question of the Lechem Mishnah on the Rambam. The Lechem Mishnah said that if the Rambam holds that Yerushas Habaal is drabanan, then how in the world could the Gemara and Erech even have the suffix and the Rambam paskin the suffix? Remember the Rambam, not just the Gemara, the Rambam. The Rambam says we have a suffix about the psak, and therefore whoever has it gets to keep it. And if you grab it, you can keep it. For 1 second. Yerushas Habaal is only drabanan, midaraisa. He's an acher totally. How could that be considered? You're a stand-in for her. You're mamet seachuza. How is that possible? That's in terms of daraisa definitions. That was the Lechem Mishnah's kasha. The Lechem Mishnah didn't answer a little bit, but the Merkavas HaMishnah said, no, that's the Chiddush. The Rabbanan could even affect Doraisa definitions. We need someone who's not an Acher. Once the Rabbanan say that the Baal is Yoresh, and they could say that on a Doraisa level, he's not an Acher. He's not an Acher. That's the Chiddush, and that's what he suggests for the Rambam. It doesn't work perfectly. I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday. It doesn't work perfectly in that we said a few minutes ago that the Rambam seems to hold that Yerushas Rabbanan is chus of ishus because he puts it in with those 10 things. But even if it's a chus of ishus, maybe we could say he gave him this chus of ishus, gives him the same shem yoresh. It doesn't work perfectly with that suggestion that we said earlier. I agree with that. But either way, this is the Merkavas HaMishnah's shot of this Rambam in Hilchos Arachin. So we started to go into. So is that such a chiddush? Is it such a chiddush what the Merkavas HaMishnah says that the Rabbanan have the power to define things even in Daraisa categories? The two that we saw yesterday, again, and this is a topic on its own we could spend a long time on, but we're just jumping in and jumping out. We quoted 2 examples yesterday. We quoted the Shita of Tosfos, Sukkah of Gimel, Machlokas Tosfos and the Ran, talking about a sukkah that is also midrabanan. Look at that, also midrabanan. And Tosfos says, there, Gimel and Aleph, interpreting the words. The words sound this way, that you don't even get a mitzvah on a Doraisa level. Lo kiyamta mitzvah sukkah miyamecha means the Rabbanan knocked out this person getting a mitzvah. Lo kiyamta mitzvah sukkah miyamecha dafilu midaraisa lo yatsa. Even midaraisa, you don't get a mitzvah. Okay, so maybe that's like the Merkavas HaMishnah for the Rambam, right? The Rabbanan affecting Daraisas. Or we saw the Minchas Chinuch. We asked it about Kiddush, about Berachas Hamazon. Again, a very, a much discussed Minchas Chinuch. And again, I think Yaakov mentioned to me after Shir yesterday. Yes, this goes against the Rabbi Kiva Eger's comment. Rabbi Kiva Eger is a comment in Hilchos Shabbos that when somebody comes home on Friday night and says Shabbos, you're Yotzei Kiddush Daraisa. Yotzei Kiddush Daraisa. That's what the Rabbi Eger says. Just saying Shabbos, because that's saying Dvarim, Mishabchim as Shabbos. So that would be against it. That would be against it. That's the question of what we hold like that, Rabbi Kiva Eger. But the Minchas Chinuch here in Mitzvah Lamed Gimel said, Mitzvah Lamed Gimel, Lamed Aleph. 1 second, let me find it. Lamed Aleph, Mitzvah Lamed Aleph. Avol Nusach HaKiddush Eina Min HaTorah. Avol Min HaTorah L'Omer Kol Echol V'Ma Sherotze. You just have to say something nice about Shabbos and also Berachas Hamazon. But then he says it could be otherwise. It could be one Chazal connected. Atasha Tignu Chazal Anusuch. Tahainu Lahaskal B'Shem Umalchus Ulisayim. The Hulo Asakain. Rak Omer Dvarim Me'atzmo V'Malas Hayom. Efshar Af Min HaTorah Lo Yatsa. It's possible that even Midaraisa you're not Yotzei. Kimoche Kasvu Tosfos and Sukkah Daf Gimel. And he quotes that Tosfos. Quotes Sukkah Daf Gimel. Lo kiyamta mitzvah sukkah miyamecha. 1 second. I just have a hole in the bottle here. It's leaking all over. Hold on. Wow. I'll just be right back. I'm just bringing this in the sink. So the Minchas Chinuch says that it could be that based on Tosfos and Sukkot Daf Gimel, that looking at the Sukkot B'Yamecha, you're not even Yotze on a Doraisa level. So maybe this is the basis for what the Merkavas HaMishnah says. The Merkavas HaMishnah suggests that the Rabbanan affect Doraisas. So we started to discuss this. Is this Davar Pashut? Can we be mechalik between what the examples of the that we gave versus the Merkavas HaMishnah? So how could you be mechalik? I think some mentioned this yesterday. How could you be mechalik between? You might not be mechalik. You might just say, yeah, the Rabbanan could affect our Doraisas, and therefore, just like Kiddush, just like Birchas Hamazon, just like Sukkah Psula, so too, this case. So to this case, you might be mechalik. I think someone mentioned this yesterday. I don't remember. If you think about it, there's a big difference between the two examples that we just gave, and the Merkavas HaMishnah is more of a jump. What he suggests for the Rambam. And maybe it's the Rambam. It sounds that way for the Rambam even. The Rabbanan have the power to tell you what to do and what not to do. And they have the power to say, they control our behavior. They have that power. They can control normative practices. Don't sit in this sukkah. And they can say, if you sit in this sukkah, you're not Yotze. They have that power to control our behavior. The Torah says you have to listen to the Rabbanan. So to say that they say if you sit in the sukkah, it's meaningless, okay, we can understand that. It's a chiddush, but we can understand it. Because the Rabbanan have the power to tell us what to do and not do. This is wrong. This is right. Benching, kiddush. They tell us what to do. Bench like this. Right? Make kiddush like this. And if you don't do it like that, so then okay, we understand. You're not going to get any credit. Because the Rabbanan have that power. But that's not what's going on in our Rambam. With the Merkavas HaMishnah and the Lechem Mishnah, our Rambam is something beyond. It's not just about do this, do that. What's our Rambam talking about? There's no mitzvah involved, really. Right? The husband buys the field. Is that considered like an acher, a different person, or like her? The Rabbanan are going to control that? That's not about your behavior. That's a purely Doraisa definition. That's a bigger chiddush. Again, to tell you, do this, do that, the rabbis always tell us what to do, what not to do. Blow shofar, don't blow shofar. Sit in the sukkah, don't sit in the sukkah. Bench like this, make kiddush like this. That we understand. That we understand. They can tell us what to do and what not to do. But in our case, they're not telling us anything about what to do and what not to do. There's a Doraisa definition. Who can be mom in a field? If somebody buys it back, so does it go back to the owner? Only if it's a stand-in for the owner. If it's anybody else, then it doesn't. So, fine, they said the Baal is Yerush. But does that make him into her? He's allowed to Yarshin her, but how does that make him her? That's just fitting it into the Doraisa definition of a category, and that could be looked at as a step beyond the examples that we gave. Is there any model? Is there any model for such an example? Definition? So I gave you two, which I think might be closer models to what we're talking about than the other. And that's, first of all, it's a Beferish Gemara. You read the Gemara and it screams out at you. Gemara in Sukkah. Or in Sukkah, I gave you to look at the Chav Gimel. Chav Gimel Amid Aleph. What did the Gemara say there? There was a machlokas Tanaim about a sukkah on an animal, a sukkah on a camel. Right? Those of you, Bez Hashem, I don't know if they had it this year. They usually have it every year, but Bez Hashem, you should all be back in Eretz Yisrael next year. And on Sukkot, they have a place called Nod Tumim. about half an hour from here. And they have there all the sukkahs in the Mishnah. It's like a natural, it's like a park. You walk through and they have a camel there with a sukkah on its back. They have a boat in the water with a sukkah on it. They have a
Rabbi, I went there. I went there this past sukkahs.
I'm saying it's great. They have a sukkah, a teepee, all the thing, and they have a sign next to it. Sukkah, usher, hustle. It's great. Better than Hershey Park. I'm telling you. But anyway, so sukkah gabi gamal. So says the Gemara, machlokas, whether you can build a sukkah on a gamal. Rabbi Meir says it's kosher. Going a sukkah on top of a camel is kosher. Rabbi Yehuda posel. Rabbi Yehuda says it's possible. The question is why? What's the problem? Why wouldn't it be? What's wrong with a sukkah on a camel? Right? What are the requirements? It has to be 10 tefachim high. It has to be 7 by 7. You have to have schach. You have everything. What's the problem? My time is Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say it's possible? Amar kra chaga sukkah tasal chashavas yamim. Make for yourself a sukkah 7 days. So we darshan. It's not just the holiday, but it's the sukkah itself. Make for yourself a sukkah 7 days. Sukkah haruya l'shiva shma sukkah. A sukkah that you could sit in for 7 days, that's called a sukkah. Sukkah she'ein haruya l'shiva lo shma sukkah. A sukkah that you can't sit in for 7 days is not called a sukkah. Chaga sukkah tasal chashavas yamim. You need a sukkah you can sit in for 7 days. Why can't you sit in a sukkah for 7 days if it's on the camel? Somebody help me out.
Shabbos.
Shabbos Yantif. You're not allowed to go on top of an animal on Shabbos and Yantif. Isser derabanan. Zera of Ishtamshus bebehema. Derabanan make it there because you might pull off a branch, whip a horse, but they answered all Ishtamshus bebehema. So Rabbi Yehuda says, because there's an Isser derabanan, this sukkah cannot be used all 7 days, so therefore it's not called a sukkah. Rabbi Meir, what did Rabbi Meir answer back? Hanami midaraita mechsechazi. What are you talking about, Rabbi Yehuda? I agree you need a sukkah for 7 days. But you know what? You do have it for 7 days. On a Torah level, this sukkah is perfect for 7 days. Rabbanan said you can't go in there. That doesn't change its definition on a daraisa level. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. But what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Yehuda says, no. Yehuda says, no. The definition is Ru'ya L'Shiva. And here, it's not Ru'ya L'Shiva. So again, Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, that might be a better parallel to our case. That's the definition of a sukkah. If the Rabbanan say you cannot go in the sukkah for 2 days out of the week, that affects the definition of a sukkah on a Torah level. And so this is not just about what you should do, what you shouldn't do. This is defining sukkah. And if it's defining the sukkah, so then maybe that's a better parallel to our case of acher or not an acher by ma mitzveh achuza. One example. And I give the other example that I saw some of you were working on. And that's the beginning of Makos. The beginning of Makos. Right, first mission, Makos. First mission, Makos tells us, right, meeting on a bish ploni, ben gerusho, ben chalutza. The Mishnah tell us, even if the aid is a Kohen and he becomes a Zomim, you don't say he becomes a Chalal. No, you give Malchus. Look, Erbam, give Malchus. Fine. Asks the Ritva. Interesting that Tosfos did not ask this question. That's interesting. We're not going to get to that now. But many of the questions that the Ritva deals with are questions that Tosfos asked, and he had done it and expand. Tosfos is not bothered by this question. But the Ritva is. What's the Ritva's kasha? What's the Ritva's kasha? Somebody tell me. What's the Ritva's question? You got it, Nathaniel? Do you see the Ritva? You have to see the Ritva. Who saw the Ritva? Yeah?
I think it was that it's the chalutza is derabanan, the issue of chalutza is derabanan, so how can you have zomamin midoraisa?
Right. According, on a Torah level, a Kohen is ushered to marry a Grusha. Last week's Parsha. Or anyone who halachically is called a Zona. The word Zona literally means to stray from, but it has a halachic definition. A Zona is anyone who is Nicola Pasula, someone who had bia with someone who is pasuk to her. A Goy, an Evikanani. Interesting. Anybody here named the last name Azulai? Anybody know I have any friends? Their last name is Azulai. Nobody has any? Azulai is the Chida's name was Chaim Yosef David Azulai. That was the Chida's name. But some say that Azulai was a Kohanic name that stands for Isha Zona V'Chalal Lo Yikachu. That's the Rashi Tevis of Azulai. Isha Zona V'Chalal Lo Yikachu. So I don't know. That's what they say. But anyway, on a Doraisa level, a Kohen cannot marry a Grusha. A Kohen cannot marry a Chalala. A Chalutza, Midoraisa, a Kohen's allowed to marry. Midrabanan, he can't. Rabbanan then Chalutza is like a Grusha, and therefore there's an Issa Rabbanan for Kohen to marry a Chalutza. So that's why the Ritva says here, if the Eidim say that this man is a Ben Gerusha, a Ben Chalutza, fine, a Ben Gerusha, he's a Chalal. A Ben Chalutza, he's a Chalal D'Rabbanan. So what are they saying? On a Daraisa level, they're not saying anything. Says the Ritva. Why is Chalutza here? So what does the Ritva say? It's Lav Dafka. Really, it doesn't mean it. But many times in Shas, when Grusha is mentioned, Chalutza is also mentioned, and they always go together. So that's why Ruda Nasi wrote it here too, even though it really doesn't belong here, and halacha doesn't apply to it. It's just because Ben Gerusha was mentioned. Apostle Ben Chalutza, Einam and Torah, Elam Midrabanan. Midrabanan Psul. There's no hazama here. Because what you try to do is meaningless on a daraisa level. Wow. Or I'll just read you, I would have given it to you. But the Ritva got this from his grand Rabbi, the Ramban. I just gave it to you from the Ritva, but the Ramban's lashon is Hadatan ben Chalutza, Lav Dafka. Right, Eli, you asked me before Shir. This is even clearer. Lav Dafka, says the Ramban. Ben Chalutza shouldn't be in here. The Chalutza d'Rabbanan he. Umin Torah kasher. Heich lokin es hamazimin. Es ha mem. What does mem stand for? Edom zomamin. Not sure what mem stands for. Oh, maybe lokin es hamem. Lokin the 40 lashes. But Ramban says they're ksherim midaraisa. So again, that's the Ritva, that's the Ramban. Okay, it's a great question. It's an answer that maybe we'd rather not say. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi threw it in there because it always says Grusha with Chalutza. Come on, but he's writing the Mishnah. Did I write something wrong? Again, that's what they say. But that's what the Ritva says. That's what the Ramban says. The Aruch Laner. The Aruch Laner. Classic. Who wrote the Aruch Laner? Have we learned an Aruch Laner yet this year? Aruch Laner was. Aruch Laner was Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger. Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, 1800s. He was one of the strong Rabbanim at the beginning of the Reform movement. He has a commentary on 10 different Masechtas. Right, he has on Makos and Krisus and Sukkah, and on Sukkah it's printed with the Bikurei Yaakov. Right, his Bikurei Yaakov and his Chuvas are also, just going blank for a second. His Chuvas are, 1 second. Binyan Sion, thank you. The Binyan Sion. Why am I getting so excited by the Binyan Sion? The Binyan Sion are his Chuvas. So the Binyan Sion, I'll just tell you a story once we're here because it's the same author. In my Binyan Sion, it has a little name here. It says Hillel Horowitz. And then it says Shalom Rosner. But it says Hillel Horowitz. Why does it have somebody else's name? Did I steal the Sefer? I didn't steal the Sefer. But many years ago, before we made Aliyah, 15, 18 years ago. No, it was early years in our marriage. Probably about 25, and I think 2 of the kids little. We went to Hebron or a deal, whatever. One day we went to Hebron. We were getting all of it, deal around Hebron. And we went into this can. Somebody who lives there. And he's telling us a story about Hebron. But when I go into a house, my eyes are always drawn to the Svarim. All of a sudden, I'm looking at his bookcase. And all of a sudden, I see a Binyan Sion on his shelf. I'm like, you have a Binyan Sion. He says, yeah. I say, it's out of print. I've been looking to get a Binyan Sion for like ages. He's like, really? Take it. I'm like, I'm not taking your Binyan Sion. He said, no, really take it. I said, I didn't come here to take your Binyan Sion. That's not why I said this. I just like noticed it. And he says, look, I'm busy building up the land. I'm building up Hebron. You know what? You just take it and learn it. Whenever you learn it, you think of me. Don't worry about it. That's how I got my Binyan Sion. I think now it's like not out of print, but that's the same author, right? The Aruch Laner, the Binyan Sion. He has shuvas about the Eretz Yisrael, the Shiva Sion. Anyway, but the Aruch Laner, that's a little background about Rabbi Yaakov Hetlinger and the Binyan Sion and the Bikurai Yaakov he wrote on Hilchos Sukkah. Anyway, so he quotes this Ritva, the first Aruch Laner in Makkas. He quotes this Ritva, but I didn't have the Ramban. And he notes that it's Dachuk. It's Dachuk. He says, no, simple. Right, hopefully you saw it. Kivan the al kol panim ata, lefi ma shepaslu Rabbanan chalutza lekohen, ratu lepotzlo, because the Rabbanan say, a chalutza is tulo lekohen. And they're damaging him in this way. Shaper lucky min Torah. Gonna get malchus midaraisa. The mali and ratzal afsido mamon sheyesh lo din azam min Torah, or ratzal afsido yichutzo. Right? If they say they make up a story that he stole, they made up the whole thing. That's damaging him. Here too, they're damaging him. Technically, is Durabanan? Yeah, but so what? So what? Even this Durabanan type of damage could be called Kasher Zomam on a Daraisa level. It can be called Kasher Zomam. And he quotes our Gemara in Sukkah by the camel. Ayin Sukkah Davchav Gimel. Shenira Gamkein Bekia Gavna. Sukkah Shasher Lalos Lami Durabanan Minatorah. Minatorah lo Nikri Shui L'Shiva. That's what it is. That's what you see. And therefore he says, Asi Shapir, the Yeish Lomar. He says, why doesn't it say, it says Chalutza on purpose to teach us this? Not the opposite of the Ramban and the Ritva. Yes, Lav Dafka. No, it's more Dafka than the other thing. It doesn't even say Mamzer, right? It says, Dafka, this one, to teach us that even by a Chalutza, you're going to get Malchus. Unbelievable. The exact opposite formulation and message of that. Somebody asks, is there Malchus Rabbanan according to the Ritva? Malchus Mardus is whenever the Rabbanan want to institute it. Never tell. Sometimes there's Malchus Mardus, sometimes not. We don't have any evidence. Yes, Yonatan.
How is the Aruch Laner arguing on a Rishon? How does that work?
In Achron, there's a lot of arguing on a Rishon. That's not a problem. I mean, and if you're a Baal, if you have somebody with big shoulders, sometimes you could argue. It's not like, first of all, it's not that all the Rishonim say this. Most of the Rishonim, don't talk. Many of the Rishonim don't talk about it. So you already have something, mentioning. But sometimes, Rav Soloveitchik sometimes gives different answers to questions, or Chaim gives different answers to questions than sometimes other Rishonim do. You can't argue on Chazal. It says in Shulchan Aruch. You can't argue on I think we maybe had a share about this. Now we will, on a Wednesday night. You can't argue on the Gemara, right? That's clear. And I'm arguing on Tanoim. That's a question, but you can't argue on the Gemara. But on Achron, on a Rishon, that technically, again, if you are a big enough Achron that you're able to do that, then you have the rights. I could also argue on a Rishon, but that's like silly. But again, if you're somebody of the Aruch Laner's caliber, that's somebody who has the right and ability to do that. Why am I bringing this in? Because I think this could be another example of a Doraisa definition. It's not just telling you what to do. Remember the first 2 cases about sukkah, sitting in a sukkah, and that's possible in the Beis Shammai, or the case of Kiddush. They're the Rabbanan telling you what to do, what not to do. But here, it's about definitions of Kasher Zamam. about the definition of a sukkah, so maybe those are better models for the pshat of the Rambam, of the Merkavat HaMishnah. Okay. Either way, to sum up what we've done so far before we have the last section, we've had 3 different ideas, 3 that are really 4 different ideas about Yerushas Habaal, right? Is it and we saw maybe this is the suffix of the Gemaras, and this is the suffix of the Machlokas we've shown him, different Tosvasim. Is it Yerusha? Right? It's a different type of Yerusha, but it's Yerusha. Right? Once you get married, is it Sheirus? Like Tosfot says. Is it Zechus Ishus? It's just part of marriage. The Zechus Ishus, which if you say is Rabbanon, that's a good chance, like the Avnei Miluim said. Or even if it's Rabbanon, maybe it's a Shem Yorish, which is like approach number 1. You can say that in the world of Daraisa Yerusha. She does that it's Daraisa. You can say that even if it's Rabbanon. And that last one, we said maybe that can help with the Rambam. You need to say that if you say Yerushas Habaal is the Rabbanon, to say you could still be a Ma'amid Sadeh Daraisa, so that would fit better if you're a real stand-in. It's not just a schus that you have. You're a real stand-in, right? And then we just said, if you say that though, that relates to the Rabbanon and Daraisas and different definitions. Okay. What about, let's get to some nafkaminas now. Nafkaminas lahalacha, between what approach you take Yerushas Habaal. The first is the Rambam that I gave you. All right, the Rambam and the Ramban. What about Safek Gerushin? Not the case we said before, where somebody is thinking about divorcing his wife. A man threw a get to his wife, and there was a Safek, whether it was closer to him, closer to her. Then the woman died. Who gets the Yerusha? Safek Gerusha. That's the question. Rambam, Perek Aleph, Halacha Tes, and Hilchos Nachlos. Says the Rambam. Mi shenis garsha Safek Gerushin b'meisa ein Habaal Yarsha. Says the Rambam, her Yarshim get it, not him. Remember, let's say she has kids from a previous marriage. So they want the Yerusha, and the husband wants the Yerusha. Says the Rambam, they get the Yerusha. Ein Habaal Yarsha. And the Rabbi argues. Rabbi says, no, he gets it. Even by Safek Gerushin. Quote the Gemara Mesechus Gittin and Yerushalmi. Lamaisa, he says, Safek Gerusha lo kol shekain. A husband's going to get it. So what is this machlokas about? Safek Gerushin, machlokas Rambam and the Ramban. So again, it could be. Anybody have any suggestions? What are they arguing about? What might they be arguing about? It could be they're arguing about whether Yerushas Daraisa, Yerushas Habaal Daraisa, Yerushas Habaal Darabanan. Meaning L'shitasa. The Rambam holds Yerushas Habaal is Darabanan. What does the Rambam say? He doesn't get it. Why? Because her kids are Yarshim Daraisa. Vadai. He's a Safek Darabanan now. Right? Safek Darabanan versus a Vadai Daraisa, they are her children. So maybe the Rambam says he doesn't get it because the Rambam L'shitasa. And it's a Rabbanan, Safek Rabbanan. While there, Yarshim Daraisa. Well, the Ravid would say, no, Yerushas Habaal is also Daraisa. So they're both Daraisas, and he's the Muchsak Baal. Right? He was the Muchsak Baal. So you don't know if the Gershon took place, but there's a Cheskas Eishes Ish, Cheskas Baal. So maybe that's the machlokas between the Rambam and the Ramban. I'll take the question in a second. It could be about whether Yerushas Habaal is Rabbanan and Yerushas Habaal is Daraisa. One maybe could also say it's about our last question. Maybe they both hold. Are you with me? Right? Maybe they both hold that Yerushas Habaal is Rabbanan. Even the Ravid holds Yerushas Habaal is Rabbanan. So why would he win? Why would he win if Yerushas Habaal is Rabbanan? Right? Maybe they're arguing, if they both hold the Rabbanan, then what's the Nakudas HaMachlokas? Maybe they're arguing about within the Rabbanan, what approach do you take to Yerushas Habaal? Ravid says, Ravid says Daraisa and Ishus, I don't remember. But if it goes Daraisa and Ishus, that's the first approach. But if you just have this, is there any way to say, you can look at other Rishonim also, that Yerushas Habaal is D'Rabbanan and you still had this machlokas? Maybe it would be about our issue. About if you say Yerushas Habaal is just a schus of ishus, a pure monetary debate, so then he has a monetary hold, but they're Yarshim, so they win. This is just a schus of ishus. They're real stand-ins for her, so that's stronger. Maybe the other sheet would be, if he's a din she'er, that's stronger than a Yoresh. If he's a real stand-in Yoresh, then maybe that could be, even stronger. Again, but I have to check again. Dov said that the Rabbi in Isha says it's Daraisas, then it will be like the first approach. This is one nafkamina. One nafkamina that you would say if it's what approach you would take. She'eris, Yoresh, Chulu. There was a hand up? No. What about the following? Rabbi Chanan to look at, but Rabbi Chanan in the Kovetz Haaretz in Siman Mem. Siman Mem discusses the Rambam and Hilchos Ishus about misalik mimitzas nechasim. What if the husband wants to remove himself from the rights of part of the nechasim? Can he do that? Could he say, I only want a hold of mixas nechasim? So in Ishus, Chaf Gimel, the Rambam in Chaf Gimel Hey says, Isna ima shelo yirashena. How is it lo yirashena? This is the case where we learned. We saw this a few times already. The beginning of a code save. The Gimel and Tubis. V'chenim hisna ima sheyirash mixas nechaseha. He can say, I'm not going to yarshin. He can say, I'm only going to yarshin part of your nechasim. That's all good. That all works. Says Rabbi Chanan, that only works if you hold that Yerusha is a schus mamoni, a schus ishus. Says Rabbi Chanan, if he has the status of a yoresh, mamish, Rabbi Chanan thinks it would be hard to say that you could be a yoresh for part and not for others. You could remove yourself as a status of a yoresh. I don't want a yarshin. To say I want a yarshin part and not all, says Rabbi Chanan, that would be difficult. That's what he says. I'll read it to you. Hard to say that you're a yoresh for part of the nechasim, not for others. If it's all monetary as a chus of the ish is fine. I only want part of this chus. But if it's a din of a yoresh, then it will be hard to say. It will be hard to say otherwise. So Safek Yerishin could be an afkamina to the approaches. Misalik from mixas nechasim. What about Rabbi Chanan has another? There's four. There'll be four. The fourth one we're not going to have time to fully do today. But the third one is, could he be misalik himself from things that she doesn't have yet? From things that she doesn't have yet. The same paragraph in Rabbi Chanan says here, I think it would be the opposite. If you're a yoresh, then he's not a yoresh until she dies. So he can remove himself from being from yarshining something she doesn't have yet. If he already has it, he's already married, and he has that schus, then it's hard to say he can remove himself. He's already, he already has that schus of getting it. So again, he says it works in opposite ways. If you're going to look it up, it's Gimel. I'll try to take a picture of it and send it out to the group. That's a small piece in the Kovetz Haaretz. So again, Safek Yerishin, Misalik for Mixas Nechasim, Misalik for what she doesn't have yet. Last issue, again, we're not going to have time for this now because I also want to give you a thought on the Parsha, and that is the issue of Ra'ui. Again, it's really a separate topic, but the issue of the Baal not getting, taking Baroi Kibamoksan. Husband doesn't get Roi. So where do you know that from? Let's just mention the question, And we'll start with this on Sunday. I'll also send Marmakomers for the next sugya, which we'll do. That's the sugya on which gave some great agadah this year. Go tomorrow. I was debating whether to do like Moshe Rabbeinu, and a few things are discussed here. Some great stuff. So just go straight in the Gemara. Kuf Tes, Kuf Yud. The next sugya we're going to do is on Kuf Yud Amid Beis. Nitna Tarb and Itzchat Shalacha. That's the next sugya that we're going to do. So just go straight to the Gemara, though. Don't skip the Gemara. Go straight, at least through the Gemara and Rashbam, and we'll continue. Okay, but the last nafkamina in our sugya here is halacha that we know. Kuf Chaf Hama Beis. The Baal only takes muhsak when the woman dies, whatever she has, not what she was going to get. The Gemara has two sources for that. Number one is Kuf Yud Gimel, Amid Aleph. About Yair, the Gemara, hopefully you saw that Gemara. If not, you'll see it for next time, that Yair has property that his father Scoop didn't have. That's one makar, but the other makar is in Baba Kama Membeis from Kofer. Kofer, what's Kofer? The payment that if a man, Rahman al-Islam, an animal kills the person, the owner of the animal has to pay the person's yorshim. A payment, a kofer, right? If a person kills a person, he's chayiv either galutz or misa. If an animal kills a person, then he has to pay kofer. The Gemara says, but the husband is not going to get that kofer. Her yorshim get the kofer. Why? Because the Baal is not yoresh ara'ui b'muchsak. So that's a source, and Kufi Gimel Babas is a source. Tosfos there asked, what do you need two sources for? Tosfos quotes an answer, the Or Sameach quotes an answer, and the Tosfos Talmud Rabbeinu Tam quoted an answer. Tosfos Talmud Rabbeinu Tam is the one that really, I think, connects to our sugya, but to all the answers. And Hashem, that'll be the last issue that's related to the different approaches of Yerushas Habaal. Okay. I try to give you one thought on the parsha. One thought, the whole shir is on the OU website if you want to listen to it. But there's a just maybe if you've never seen it. Also, I think I mentioned this last year, maybe earlier. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Maybe I'll just say the story. You remember the story? What the Shanabek guys? You remember the story of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, or can I say it again and that'll be a good Var Torah? Say if you remember the story, you could say no, so you could if.
Oh no, it's good. It's good. Go for it.
You
I
know
don't know it. No,
You
no,
don't
no.
remember it. Okay,
No.
It's a great story, so you can say the story over, send it out. Again, everybody has to give the great Torah. Orach Chaim HaKadosh has 42 pshatim on the first pasuk in Bechukosai. You can look at the Orach Chaim. Open up in Mikros Gedolos, 42 pshatim on the first pasuk in Bechukosai. There's a story that goes with it. Orach Chaim HaKadosh, and all the Orach Chaims that have a separate volume, so they quote this story in different versions, but pretty similar in the front of the Sefer. They always had a minhag of shechting an animal every Erev Shabbos, L'kavet Shabbos, and the one time there was like one animal. The question is, was the Ani going to get it? Was the Orach Chaim going to get it? The Orach Chaim got it, and he felt bad. Whatever the detail was, he said, I have to go into a personal exile. Personal exile, which was common to growing into Golis. He went into Golis, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. So, he comes to a town one Shabbos. It was Parshat Bechukosai. And he comes in, and he sits in the back of the shul. And on Friday night, the rabbi gets up and says, Rabbosai, tonight we're going to discuss the first 14 pshatim that the great Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Reb Chaim ben Atar, the Gadol Ador, the greatest rabbi in our generation, writes on this pasuk. So the Orach Chaim stands up from the back of the shul and says, he's not so great, he's not the Gadol Ador, he's not so amazing. And they all look at him like, what? What are you saying? How can you say that? Right? For photography? They're like looking at him. Okay. The next morning, the rabbi gets up by the drasha and says, Rabbosai, now we're going to do the next 14 pshatim of the great Reb Chaim ben Atar, Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the amazing, the Gadol Ador. And again, he stands up from the back of the shul and says, he's not so great. He's not so amazing. And they start screaming at him. You run him out of shul. What are you talking about? And finally, by Shalosh Shudas time, the rabbi gets up and says, now it's time to study the last 14 pshatim of the Orach, 14 times 3 is 42. The last 14 pshatim of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the great, the most amazing. And again, he stands up from the back. He says, he's not so great. They've had enough. They take him, they throw him into the dungeon of the shul, they lock the door. And they go to Shalosh Shudas. And all of a sudden, there's a storm outside. Wow, that's never happened. Storm and lightning and thunder. The whole base medrash is shaking. They don't know what to do. They don't know what's going on. The rabbi, who must have been a Baal Kabbalah at the time, in those days, goes into his study. He does a tiny Shelas Chalom. Goes up and he talks to the heavens and says, "What's going on here?" So they say, in Shamayim, they can't make Habaal until the Orach Chaim HaKadosh gets out of your cellar. He's like, "What?" They go and he take him out. He says, "I can't believe it. I'm sorry. I didn't know who it was." He said, "Okay, no, it's good. It's good." He said that was enough busha for him to be Yotzei Galus, and he went back and he went back to his town. And that's the story of the 42 pshatim of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh that in Shamayim. But just open, do one, do a couple of the pshatim. It's just amazing. Anyway, shkoyach guys, have a great Shabbos. I'll stay on for a couple of minutes if anybody has any more questions. But if not, we'll continue on Sunday. Everybody should have chazak.